So let's assume that we're interested in determining whether there is any correlation between the percentage of the population below the poverty line, per capita income, and rates of obesity for the various states. So we'll first create a visualization for 2014 and then repeat the process for the other years that we have economic data for as well. So we'll first create a visualization that shows the relationship between the percentage of people below the poverty line in 2014 and the rates of obesity by state. For reasons that will come clearer later on, we'll start by dragging location description from the US chronic disease dataset into rows. We then add the 2014 percentage of people below the poverty line into columns, and we get this. You will notice the three nulls at the bottom. We'll deal with that a bit later on. Now, the next step is to get data from the chronic disease data set. However, since at this stage we're only interested in obesity, we first have to put a filter on the data that we pull from that data set. So to do so, I drag question into the filter shelf, and that brings up an edit filters window. I can now select the question I'm interested in, and because they're listed in alphabetical order, I can just scroll down to obesity among adults aged 18 years and older. So we add that filter. And we can now drag data value into columns as well. All right. Now, what you will notice is that the values in the data value are very high. We're looking at an obesity rate, so the maximum value we can get is 100 and not 322 as we have for Ohio here. In previous cases where we had the wrong aggregation value sum, we changed that to average. But we can't do that here because that would give us an average over all of the 5 years that we have data for. And we only are interested in the 2014 data. So in order to solve that problem, we're going to put a filter on year start. And you see that because year start is a numerical value, I get a slightly different filter window. I can drag this to the right so that we're now only looking at 2014. And the values are still a bit high. But now, because I know I'm only looking at the 2014 data, I can change this to average. So now we get the reasonable rates. And now I'm going to change this to a scatter plot by clicking on the scatter plot icon here. So this is what I get now. Now, I can make a few enhancements to this scatter plot to make it a little bit more user-friendly. So I start by dragging location description onto label so that each of the dots on the scatter plot now has a state name associated with it or a name associated with it. In general, Tableau is pretty good when it comes to deciding which labels to display. But if I want, I can change it by double-clicking on the label card in the mark shelf. And if I now say all labels allow labels to overlap each other, then I get a very busy graph. So I don't want that, so I just leave it like that and trust Tableau to do the right thing. And if I now mouse over District of Columbia, you see that we get two values, one for average data value, which we know is the obesity rate, and then the percentage of people below the poverty line, which is 26% for the District of Columbia. Now, the second enhancement I want to make is I want to change the axes. So it says average data value here, and I want to change that to say, health measure or something like that, right? So you saw I right-clicked on the y-axis. That brings up a new window, an edit axis window. I can change the title to health measure here. And I can also change the range in the axis, the scale of the axis, and so on. We're not going to do that at the moment. I'm just going to change the name to health measure. And then similarly, I'm going to change the y-axis using a similar process to percentage of individuals below the poverty line. So again, right-click, and then change this to a percentage of individuals below the poverty line. Okay. Now, if I want, I can change the appearance of the actual dots in the scatter graph by clicking on shape, and I can make all kinds of changes to this. In general, I prefer solid bubbles, but for the purposes of this example, we'll leave it at the open bubbles. Okay, so now we show the relationship between the percentage of individuals below the poverty line and what turns out to be the obesity rate. I can now add the per capita income by dragging per capita income from 2014 into the size card on the mark shelf. And if you see the sizes change, if I get rid of the show me pane, then you also see that it has added, that Tableau has added a legend which indicates what the sizes mean. Now, the fact that the bubbles now have meaning, the size of the bubbles has meaning now as well, means that this is now a bubble chart, officially a bubble chart. So a scatter plot in which the size of the bubbles gives meaning as well is typically referred to as a bubble chart. And it's important to distinguish this from a packed bubble chart. So I'm going to illustrate that. So for example, I may want by name, I may want to show the per capita income by states, right? Okay. Now, this allows me to compare values, right? But if I can also do that in a packed bubble chart, where now the sizes become important, and the size tells me something. The size of the bubble tells me, you know, the size of the per capita income. But see that I have no y-axis and no x-axis. I can change it, make this a little bit more prettier by putting name and colors and so on. But this is a packed bubble chart. It shows relative sizes, which is not the same as call it a normal bubble chart like the one we have here. And if I now mouse over the District of Columbia, you remember we had 2 values. Now we have 3 values, namely what we know to be the obesity rate, the per capita income in 2014, and the percentage of people below the poverty line in 2014 as well. Okay, one more thing. You will notice that the name of the legend is the same as the field that we use to create the size of the bubbles, but we can change that by mousing over it and then edit title, and I'm just going to change this to per capita income. Okay. Now, the problem with the three nulls that I mentioned earlier arises because there are values in location description from the US chronic disease data set that do not correspond to any values in 2014 economic data set. In particular, Guam, the Virgin Islands, and the United States. Moreover, an inspection of the bubble chart that we just created will show you that there are certain territories in here that are not states, at least not yet. So what we're going to do then is to make sure we get rid of these nulls and we get rid of the territories that are not states. We're going to put yet another filter on location description. And then we're going to take out, let's see, the District of Columbia, Guam, Puerto Rico, the United States as a whole, and the Virgin Islands. And you see that the problem of the nulls have now disappeared. You also notice a difference in the appearance of the scatterplot and a change in the legend. And the reason, of course, that Puerto Rico had by far the lowest per capita income and set the lower limit on the per capita incomes. That has now, with Puerto Rico removed, that now has become Mississippi. And we can therefore raise in that legend the lowest per capita income from something like around 11,000 to 21,000. Now, since we are interested in doing the same for all of the other sheets, visualizations we're going to create, what I can do on location description in the filter shelf, I click on it, I do apply to a worksheet, and then I say all using this data source. So if I now create a new data source, right, and I drag in a new worksheet and I drag in location description, you will see that Guam and Puerto Rico and the District of Columbia are no longer there. Let me get rid of this one too. And that's the reason why I started with location description in creating this visualization. If I had used name out of the 2014 economic data and put a filter on that, that would not have propagated to the 2015 and the 2016 and so on name, because they are different variables. So the only thing left to do then is to give this sheet a better tab, 2014, and give it a better title. And now we have to redo this process for 2015, 2016, 2017, and 2018 as well. But we'll do that offline, so to speak.